Um, okay, so I was just gonna start. I guess I'd like a show of hands. I was gonna go through just again, like I did in the very first one, was just walk through basic options trading. I don't know if there's anybody in here who still wants to go over that. I don't see the two guys that I talked to specifically. I was gonna go over with are not here. Um, but if anybody else wants me to go over really quickly, otherwise we'll just go right into kind of MicroStrategy talking. Fernando, you want to take a look? All right, I'll share my screen. We'll go through it very quickly, and then we'll kind of just talk about MicroStrategy a little bit and maybe go over some of these catalysts that we're talking about and just the general. Um, so let me share my screen real quick. Okay. Um, you know what? Hold on. I think I can do better than that. Let me share. All right. So everybody see my screen? Okay. Um, so yeah, just to go over again the very basics of, I think in the beginning certainly was my options beginning, and I think that's what a lot of people are kind of here to do is to go along using leverage and using option strategies on MicroStrategy is what we've been talking about. And I want people to just sort of a very quick overview of the actual physical buttons of I want to go long, how do I do it? So that you don't make mistakes like I did. So, so just my very first options buy was I had $2,000. I didn't know anything about what I was doing. I just wanted to go long on MicroStrategy. And I just found an option that I could afford and I purchased it. And that was my entire thesis for that. Since then I've been learning more about strategies you can use and a little bit more about the kinds of trade-offs you're making with different options. But the option that I've been telling a lot of people to buy for this particular trade is kind of something that's about a year out or about there. Again, I will say again, my thesis for this is that I want to be out of levered positions sometime in the spring or early summer of next year. I'm going to play this market as if it's going to sort of repeat similar markets beforehand, and I'm going to own Bitcoin forever, but I don't plan on being in levered positions past the spring or summer time frame. I think a lot of people have sort of been in that same boat, and I hope it'll work out. Um, but that is my thesis. So with that thesis, I plan on buying December calls. And so in this particular case, I'm on the trading platform here with. Let me just see here. I'm on the trading platform here with MicroStrategy. I've typed in the ticker up here in the top, and I'm just in the trade product and all products. You have all these other ones. Don't worry about that for now. Just all products, and then I've just selected the option trade train. So this is the underlying. This is how it performed today. This is the after hours. It's up at 364 in after hours, and I'm just looking at the option chain. And particularly, I'm going to look at these December calls. So these are all the different dates that you have that you can choose from. You have all these weeklies in here, and then you can trade all the way out till January of 2027. So for this particular trade, I'm just looking at 19 December 2025. I think it's a good trade for anybody who's getting in the beginning to want to buy their first call option. Something in that neighborhood is going to give you enough time for what you think to happen, and enough time to get the times you get in trouble with options is when you go really short term and really out of the money, or by out of the money I mean any option that is um, considerably above the current price. So like right now, the day it closed at 353. So we're going to be looking at options for December 19th. And up here, normally it's going to default to like four or six options. We're going to pull up all on this so that you get to see all these prices. So right here in this middle column, that's your strike price. It goes all the way down to $10. And if you scroll all the way to the bottom, I think 1080 right now. Yeah. 1080 is going to be the highest price that you can purchase. So that means I am purchasing the ability to buy that underlying stock, MicroStrategy in this case, at a strike price of 1080 at a future date. In this case, that date is the 19th of December 2025. So a little more than a year out from now. Um, and then you have over here, you have the last price that it was traded at, the bid price for that trade, and the ask price for that trade. Um, my strategy is that I always pick the bid price, and then I bid under that bid by 10 or 15%, depending on how I'm feeling about that stock. Because, and you have to realize, because these prices move so much throughout a day, that trading well below the bid price is normally going to get filled within that day. You can do it even a little bit further out, if you're not worried about the price, and especially these last few days where the prices really come down a lot, you're most likely going to get filled when you put that bid in there. So again, I'm going to pick a price that is somewhere out of the money here. So we have got this expiration here. We've got these strikes. This is where you see the price change is going to be right around whatever the price is currently. So again, after hours is trading 364. So here's your price breakdown. Somewhere between 360 and 365 is your in the money and out of the money prices. And then I come down here and it's all about how much money do you want to spend, how much money do you have, and what's your risk tolerance. So these are for 100 contracts, so you have to multiply all these numbers by 100. So right now, if I wanted to buy something at about $500, which I think is a pretty safe bet, and um, if I come to the Analyze tab and let's pull up the chain for MSTR here, price off. December 19, 420 call. Um, so I can add these simulated trades and it'll give me all of the information that I need for these. Mhm. Now let me go back to trade here. Okay. So here's this 500, 140, 146 is the bid for this. It'll put it down here, and this gives me my different options I can make. So defaulted to sell, I want to buy to open. Right now, if you look here, it'll say, so it automatically defaults to 10 contracts. I just want to buy, I'm going to spend $15,000. So I just want to do one contract, and then, that's zero, one contract. And then the price that you're offering is 153 because that's basically what it defaulted to up here. If you go, let's go back down to 500. So 153 is that ask price. So if you selected this and you just said confirm send 153, when the market's open tomorrow, if nothing changes, you're going to get filled, and you're going to get filled well above the current price, which means it's going to cost you, as soon as it fills, you're going to be down a couple $1,000s. And I know that because that's exactly what happened to me. The first time I bought one of these, I used the price that they automatically gave me at 153. It was well above the trading price. As you can see here, the last was 143. And so I got filled and I was like, okay, cool. And I was already down, $1,000 or $1,500, whatever it was on my trade. And so you just want to make sure that when you put this in here, you put a price that is considerably lower than what the current price is. So maybe I put like 135 in here as my limit, and then order. Let me just move this out of the way. And then you can come over here. That's a limit order, and then you can do day, or meaning it's going to expire. If it doesn't get filled by the end of the day, it'll cancel automatically, or you can go good till canceled, which means it will stay on there for multiple days until it either gets filled or you cancel it yourself. And then it's a confirm and send, and it will give you, it'll tell you all of your positions, how much it's going to cost, resulting pi power, whatever. I don't have any cash in my account right now, so I can't actually purchase these, but that one's going to cost me $13,500 when it actually fills.
So can I ask a question real quick?
Those are just basic questions, basic, how to do it, and I'll leave it there, and I'm ready for questions. So go ahead.
Yeah, just a question. You said about 15,000, but you said that you're putting in an order for one,
Yep.
and I see the one, 145 to 153. How does that get to 15,000? Is it a bundle or something?
So each contract represents 100 shares.
100 shares. Okay.
So it's whatever this price is here is going to be times 100. So in
Okay.
this case, 135 times 100 gets you $13,500.
Okay. And for that, you're getting 100, you're getting the opportunity to
Buy 100 shares at that price in the future.
at the strike price of 500.
Yes. Yep.
Okay. And so what you're hoping for is that it's 2,000.
Exactly. Yeah.
Okay.
And again, like when I was first starting getting into this, I thought, okay, I can only make money if I get to that strike price, and that's also not true. Basically you can draw a line, a risk line between the current price and that price over time. And
Yeah.
so it kind of like on an XY graph, it would look something like this. So if the price runs really hot, really fast, your option will become very valuable. Even if you don't get to 500, let's say tomorrow it jumps up and it's open at 490. The option you bought today, when the price is at 346 or 360, is going to be considerably more valuable.
And could you sell it?
And you can sell it then, yes. And you can sell
Okay,
it any
got it.
time between now and then. And so
Perfect.
if the price is running faster, the opposite is true, obviously, as well. If the price goes in the opposite direction, it's going to become much less valuable. And also, if the price stays the same, you lose value of your option every day that the price stays flat. So
Okay.
it's
So
time value of money. So you need it
you
to go
have to
up. You
sell it.
need it to go up over time. Sorry.
You have to sell it by the call date
If
on
you're
the
in the money,
contract.
you can let it expire. Okay. So if it's above 500, you can let it expire, and then you will be assigned those shares, those 100 shares, at the price, which means you need to come up with the money to actually buy 500 shares, or sorry, 100 shares at $500. So you would need $50,000 to purchase those. Did I do that math right? Yeah.
Right.
So you would need $50,000. Now, if your options are significantly in the green, if you're in profit and you have $50,000 of profit on your options, then you can use that profit to buy those shares. But if you don't, like let's say it closes at 550 and you don't have 50 grand extra in your account to pay for those shares, they'll still get assigned to you, but your account will be assigned with a negative balance, and you'll be forced to sell those shares to cover it. And usually Schwab, like it's a phone call. You say, hey, the markets are closed. I plan on selling this on Monday. Sorry, I got a negative balance over the weekend. And they're like, yeah, we understand. They give you a couple days grace period to square up your account, and you don't get any kind of penalties.
Okay.
If you left it for a while, you start getting charged margin on that. You start getting charged interest on that negative balance in your account.
Okay. So you have to take an action by the end date of the contract, but you have the opportunity to take an action before that.
Absolutely. Yep.
Okay.
Yeah. I mean,
Thank you.
you could buy it today, and the thing spikes 30% tomorrow, and you make 50 grand. You could sell it tomorrow, and off you go.
Okay. Thank you.
In terms of capital gains, you have to hold the option for at least a year, just like anything else, long term versus short term capital gains. So if you make any movements with those, I think there are probably exceptions to that. There's a thing called rolling where you change the date but you don't change the price. I haven't gotten far enough into how capital gains is with options that or how it differs from a normal equity position, a normal owning stock and selling stock. But the way that I've looked at it so far is essentially any move you make with those options. If you haven't held that option contract for over a year, you're going to pay short-term capital gains. Um, and again, because of my strategy now, we're inside that window. So if I take any positions now, I'm going to be getting rid of all of this leverage before next November for sure. So I'm in short-term capital gains area. Now, if you're trading with an IRA or if you have a way you can trade in your 401k or something like that, then you have a tax advantaged account, then that's different. But as far as I know, as far as I from what I can understand, that's going to be treated just like holding a stock for a year or less than a year. So, yeah, any other question? I see Brian's got his hand up. Go
Yeah, I
ahead.
was just going to chime in. Tax treatment's all the same. It's treated as income. So depending on where you are in the world, I think most of us are California. You'll pay the short-term capital gains on anything under a year held. Long-term capital gains on anything over a year. In California, I think capital gains just boils right down to your state income tax level. I could be wrong. Double check that. And then you'll also see that in options. Have you guys talked about rolling options at all?
Brent and I talked about it the other day.
Okay.
We haven't
I was
talked
just gonna
about it.
say
Yeah, go ahead.
that is also like regular tax. Anytime you roll, you're basically selling a position
Yeah,
and then opening a new one
yeah,
in one technical move, but it still creates a taxable event because you are selling a position and then buying into a new one. So
right.
there is no special treatment if you're rolling positions either. So just wanted to throw that out there.
Okay. Blake, you got something you wanted to chime in on that? You're on mute. You're on mute, Blake.
No, I was just saying that was great. No, no big questions there.
Okay. Does anybody have any other questions about what I just talked about? Yeah, go ahead, Joe.
Question for Brian, actually. Does the rolling apply to both rolling it in terms of date and rolling it in terms of the strike price? Like either way, does it still apply the same?
Yeah, rolling doesn't have anything to do with a specific strike or a specific date. It has to do with a specific contract, right? So all of these contracts are individual contracts. I'm pretty sure you could roll same strike price into the same date, but it would just cost different because the time different and time value is different on the stock.
Yeah, that makes sense. Because yeah, I've rolled them both ways, but wasn't sure about the tax
At
consequences.
my basic research, because Brent and I were talking about that the other day, I looked it up, and I believe even a roll, rolling a date or rolling any sort of roll forward, back, or otherwise is a considered a taxable event. And I actually called Schwab the other day, and they weren't particularly helpful. They're not lawyers, so they weren't giving out like definitive answers. But from my basic research and their reticence to answer the question, I get the sense um, that yeah, you're essentially taking a taxable event anytime you move a contract when you're talking about options.
And that being said, none of this is tax advice, legal advice, or financial advice.
Brian always makes sure we get that in there.
Hey man, I'm still licensed for the field, so
Oh,
I
you
got
are.
to.
Yeah, I know.
Yeah, I got to.
I love when random. I love. Yeah, that's fair. You actually are. I love when random Twitter people are like this isn't financial. It's like nobody was asking you, bro. You're fine.
Dude, my wife is like the school or the mom for my kindergartner's class, and she's like, "Oh yeah, and I'm taking all this money in for." I'm like, "What are you doing? You're taking money in? What?" Yeah, good stuff.
Nice. Yeah, somebody asked about covered calls earlier. I don't know if there's interest in. I mean, I'd turn over to Brent if there is interest in that. Otherwise, we can kind of talk about MicroStrategy a little bit.
Yeah, let's do that.
MicroStrategy.
Yeah, let's roll into
All right.
that.
I'm gonna turn over to Blake for a minute, and then I'll add some things. Blake, you wanna talk about some catalysts or otherwise? I was gonna pull up one thing, see if I have it here.
Yeah, I mean, I guess this, to start off is just to see where everyone's at or if there's any things people want to cover. I think the execution and the how-to of the calls, but are the calls, but the why is how big of a market or opportunity this might be and the mechanics behind it. So that's kind of the goal of the bull case with MicroStrategy, or just like let's say investment thesis with MicroStrategy. So with that being said, does anyone have any kind of questions or things that we want to make sure that we cover around the MicroStrategy investment thesis?
Um, I I'm curious what your thoughts are from the last few days. From we've had this massive spike. We poked at 550 for a second, and now we're down back in the 350s, $200 price drop. Do you think that there is a logical explanation for that? Is it just an overheated market? You know, should we be? Is this the peak? Do we miss it? What's our thesis kind of going forward on
Yeah, a good question. So like one of the things that as we're going over the options, I was thinking about it's always important to understand who's on most likely on the other side of the trade. And so who's on the other side of the trade are these convertible premium holders, like big insurance companies that are shorting the stock as a way to gain and take profit early on in their contracts. So there are these billions of dollars that MicroStrategy is selling in debt, convertible debt. These, from my understanding, limited understanding, is that these people are also shorting the stock or shorting portions of it to start to gain and take profit from it. So it allows them to hedge. So why that's important is because they're not they're not long the stock as much as maybe let's say I am and confident that you're going to be holding it for 10 years. So that does two things. Answering John's question, why is the stock so volatile? That adds to the volatility. There's people putting puts on the short end and kind of shorting the stock, but again, as a way to hedge themselves. So they're not like long-term um, uh, bearish on the stock. They're just kind of taking profits in a way, and with the volatility, they can do that. So there's a way to sell volatility, which I'll kind of articulate or talk about in a bit. But that adds to the volatility. So that's why we're seeing the stock go up and down. And then we're additionally, Michael Saylor is selling billions of dollars of his of more shares into the market as well. So that's suppressing the price a little bit there, which he's then going in and buying more Bitcoin. So, that's something important to understand. But so why I'm saying that additionally is that they're the ones putting the puts on or betting against our calls, which in my opinion is discounting our calls to what they would normally be because they're just looking to take some profit because they're a large insurance company or this big kind of, I don't say hedge fund, but big financial institution, and they're designed to do just that. So that adds to the volatility as well as MicroStrategy doing that, in addition to their underlying asset being Bitcoin, which is already extremely volatile. So, I'd say that was the reason of the question, but I think well, first I'll pause there, and then I'd love to get into just my general understanding in the investment thesis. So I guess, John, does that answer your question
Yeah,
or any
I mean,
questions?
if and I don't know, everybody here how long you've been around Bitcoin either, but I will say, if Bitcoin is Bitcoin and MSTR is a levered Bitcoin position, we see these kind of moves in Bitcoin a lot, and my sort of take is always like Bitcoin's like a watch pot, or Bitcoin's like Bigfoot. Like if everybody's staring at it, it stops moving or it goes in the wrong direction. And it'll only start moving again when people stop paying attention or start forgetting about it again. It always feels that way. And like there's been a lot of news about Bitcoin lately. There's been a lot of news about MicroStrategy. It's on every CNBC and NBC show every day. Somebody's talking about it. A few months ago, nobody would know who Michael Saylor is, and now it feels like everybody's talking about Michael Saylor. And it was a really hot period. I mean, we went from under 200 to 550 in less than 2 months. Um, and I think part of it is just the general cool off of any market that runs like that. But the great thing about Bitcoin, the great thing about MicroStrategy, and the great thing about Bitcoin is MicroStrategy is backed by Bitcoin. And so it's backstopped by Bitcoin. And so, unlike GameStop or some other insane sort of gamma squeeze play that it's purely speculative with nothing really backing it up, MicroStrategy is backstopped by Bitcoin, so it can't go to zero, just like Bitcoin can't go to zero. And so it's a great play, especially in this timeline, to look at it and take these prices for what they are and say, okay, might be able to wait a little bit. Maybe it's flat through Thanksgiving. Maybe it's flat through Christmas. Maybe the market stays down here. But there's so many positive catalysts that we'll get into, that I find it hard to imagine that these aren't going to look like really great prices in the next 3 to 6 months. Brian, you got something? Oh, Brian, you had your hand up. You good? Okay.
Um,
You're on
Sorry, I was
mute,
muted.
Brian.
Sorry, guys. Quick note on Blake brought up these new players in the game, right? These institutions that are now in the space. It means that these guys are designed to do this. They have all the AI software, they have all of the analytics software, and they have the smartest people that are coming out of universities that they hire because they know how to use all this software and make assumptions, good assumptions off of it, really hypotheses. And so, since options is you against someone else on the other side of the trade, and now that someone else is institutions with all of these capabilities and intelligence, this trade became a lot harder over the past couple of months now that people are paying attention to it. So to find easy deals on options and MicroStrategy is going to be hard moving forward. There's always going to be opportunity. There's always going to be deals, but now they're infinitely harder to find, not only because of the other people, right? The institutions on the other side of the trade, but also the fact that more people are looking at them. So if there is an arbitrage or a good opportunity on an options contract, it won't last long, because you've got people that are day traders that are paid to do this all day long and study it and analyze it and make big bucks doing it. They're the other ones that are now on the other side of the trade.
I will say you can always beat day traders by not day trading. I've beaten all the day traders by buying and holding Bitcoin for the last 7 years. I will beat them with MicroStrategy by buying and holding MicroStrategy for the next 6 months. That's how I feel about that. But you're absolutely right, Brian. You know, the great deals that you may have been able to get are probably gonna be harder to come by, but you can also, like I said, you can beat that by buying and holding forever.
Is that challenge somewhat reduced? So if we assume that everybody's super bullish on Bitcoin, that's why we're in it. We're super bullish on Michael Saylor and MicroStrategies. Is the nuance that you just talked about with the day traders and the AI and all that, does that become less pronounced on the longer calls like that were illustrated, the December calls versus the short, you know, uh, is is that does the time horizon reduce the challenge to beating the other guys, if
Good
you will?
question.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, I would say that like kind of my take on this is that like these people aren't necessarily smarter. They're designed differently to optimize for different things, and that goes to why this is such a good investment is because what Saylor is doing, there's a wall of money, $450 trillion of money that wants to come and wants Bitcoin exposure, right? But the problem is that all these companies, there's about 1% Bitcoin adopters in the world. So any of these companies that have like 5,000 people, whatever, 99% of them aren't Bitcoiners, right? So they can't convince and get consensus to convince their board to change the whole dynamic of the company to invest in Bitcoin. What Michael Saylor is doing to that 450 trillion, or did I say billion? I meant trillion dollars is saying, hey, listen, you want access to this the best performing investment of all time, and he puts a spigot into the dam of this wall of money and sells a convertible debt, sells debt, and sells equity, and then in addition sells volatility. So why I'm saying that is because they're designed to operate on a certain model, and that's why these convertible debt offerings supposedly are shorting the stock. Again, not because they're bearish on the stock, just because it's a way for them to get a premium out of the asset and sell the volatility. And why that's important is because they're not trying to be develop the bull case and take that back to their board and invest in Bitcoin and all those type of things. They're literally just trying to invest in the bond market, in the convertible debt market, so they can get their return. And so that's and I'd argue like that's the key person that's on the other side of this trade, which is why like there's so much opportunity here because if you see the value in what can happen in the next shit months, couple months to a year, there's a lot of upside potential here, but those organizations can't think like an individual or can't think long term. They have to think like the way they're designed to think. And so they can go back to their bosses and say like, "Hey, I bought this convertible debt. It's performed at XYZ. I'd like my bonus." They can be Bitcoiners, but they can't convince everyone in the organization to buy Bitcoin and invest in MicroStrategy because of the same issue why they can't buy Bitcoin, if that makes sense. And so understanding that gives you an understanding of who's on the other side of the trade, which is very important to understand if you're outsmarting them or you're being outsmarted. But going back to your question, and I guess Brian's point is like, and I'll let Brian, follow up on this, is that like there is efficiency in the short term, right? And I'd argue that I'm not great at understanding, I don't know how Brian is, of what kind of call options would be best within the week or the month or whatever, what's going on. But I can be confident within 6 months that the things that are happening, and we can go over a list of some of these catalysts, but the S&P 500 inclusion, the QQQ rank day, you know, a red sweep of the politicians getting in, the strategic reserve, Bitcoin reserve, like all these things are bullish things that, in the next 6 months are great catalysts that most people aren't aware of. So you've got this kind of Venn diagram of like no coiners and people that don't understand Bitcoin, and then you have a small group of people that understand MicroStrategy as a subset of that. And it takes a very small group of people to understand both. And if you're using that similar logic, we're talking about 99.9% of the people on the planet don't understand this investment, which is, again, is going back to who's on the other side of that trade. So it's those
Right.
big
There's an intimacy advantage.
in our advantage, potentially our
Yes.
advantage.
Right. Cool.
Yeah, and I was doing some reading about why we're kind of getting that dip over the last couple of days. John, I think you started talking about it originally, but to to Blake's point, they're like some of these insurance companies are hedging, but they're also selling as if you were selling options, as we talked about. Like if you didn't have the 50 grand to cover the options that you needed to purchase, you could sell those when the option exercises, and then so you basically cover that 50 grand, and basically you don't have to come out of pocket as much. So these companies that are buying this convertible bond for $1 billion or whatever the number that they're spending will hedge it, but also just so they don't have to come out of pocket for that full amount, they'll sell at a current market share because it's a way for them to get in and not have to come out of pocket the full amount.
And I think that's important to understand, but I think it's also really important for people to understand there's been some bears in the market that are like, okay, this shouldn't be traded at it should be traded at a 1x multiple of their Bitcoin assets. And that was people were talking about that for the last year, but it's clear now that it's going exponential and he's continuing to sell billions of dollars of his stock into the market and his price of his stock is still increasing as it's being diluted and he's buying Bitcoin that the multiple to his net asset value is warranted, if that makes sense. Like it's just like someone saying like Bitcoin doesn't deserve to have a price in 2010, but in 2024, it's like you got to shut the fuck up. Like it's $100,000. You've been saying that for 15 years. What's his name? The gold guy. God, I'm blanking on his name. Peter Schiff saying that for better part of a decade. And my second point on that is like what is happening with Michael Saylor is happening extremely quickly. And so the rate of him being able to buy billions of dollars, he announced a month ago that he wanted to raise $42 billion and buy Bitcoin, which is, I believe, like 3.5 years supply at the current price at that time, which was like about 75,000. So he made an obligation to buy all the Bitcoin for almost 3.5 years. And he's in 4 weeks, he's spent 10 of that $1 billion, so 1/4 of it. And if he continues at that rate, in 16 weeks, he would have gone through the $42 billion. And why I'm trying to say that is like this train is not slowing down, it's increasing its rate of return. So it's literally going up the S-curve adoption right now. And if you do the math and you kind of plot that out, he's raising 100 billion every year over the next couple of years. That makes sense. So before people were like really impressed with 42 billion, well, he's going through that in weeks now, months now. And so that can't be understated what's going on and what kind of power that gives him to buy more Bitcoin. So go ahead, John.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's the numbers sometimes when you talk about them are sort of mind-boggling. Something that we hear. I'm sure I was in this boat for a while when I would hear these words like convertible bonds and zero coupon and 50% and it was just gobbledygook. I knew it was good, but I didn't know what it meant. Um, maybe we can talk through exactly what he is offering, what a convertible bond means, who's buying it. We saw some of the people who were actually buying it today. And so, the way that it's been explained to me and the way that I understand it is he's offering this convertible bond, which normally would come with an interest rate. So when he says 0% coupon, normally it would come with a 2% or 3% coupon for a normal bond sale. But what he's offering is a 50% coupon, which means just like us talking about earlier, the ability to buy shares later, he's giving a convertible bond that allows these bondholders to buy MicroStrategy shares at a 50% above what it is today. And then he gives a date, and a lot of these dated out at 5 to 7 years. So just like I'm buying an option essentially to buy MicroStrategy in December of next year at $500, he's giving that to bondholders for the first time. He's essentially turned MicroStrategy into an option for the bond market. He's offering no interest because he's able to sell these things faster than anybody in history. It's the first company ever to do 5 of these types of offerings in a single calendar year, and they were overbought on all of them because these bond market, people don't understand how insanely big this bond market is, and he's giving them access to Bitcoin for the first time, the same way that he's giving us, or he was the first one to really give us options on Bitcoin for the first time. And so these convertible debt is being gobbled up so quickly. I mean, they were just talking about the other day, what was it? A quarter of the $3 billion offering was gobbled up by one single insurance holder in Germany,
Allianz.
Allianz. So just a single entity bought that up, right? Uh, and so again, that was something that I kept hearing that convertible debt and whatnot, and that's just one way that he can raise money to buy Bitcoin. Maybe Blake, you talk about ATMs.
Yeah. So why that's important to hit on the convertible debt and Allianz buying it, because Allianz is a big insurance company. So it's a huge European insurance company. It's the largest insurance company in the world. And the fact that they can't buy Bitcoin, but they can buy the convertible debt gives you an understanding about how important this is. In addition, they can buy the convertible debt, put it on their books, and take loans out against it, which they couldn't do with Bitcoin. If they put Bitcoin on their balance sheet, they wouldn't be able to take loans out against it. Like they wouldn't be able to do like you can do with your house, for example. So that's extremely important. So we've got a couple things. One, MicroStrategy is just taking debt out and buying Bitcoin and then paying the interest or 0% interest on it in these cases. And then he's also doing these at the money things, which is all he's doing is selling his stock to buy Bitcoin. And why that's important is because right now his stock hits like a premium to his Bitcoin holdings, let's say 5x his Bitcoin holdings. So let's say Bitcoin's $100,000. His stock is valued at $500,000 per Bitcoin. So he's like, you know what? I really like Bitcoin. I'm going to sell my stock to acquire more Bitcoin, and the shareholders that own MicroStrategy get more Bitcoin as a percent of their shares. So you're getting a dividend is the way you can think about it, or a yield, the way he's generating this. So you could buy, like as an example, he's had 60% returns on Bitcoin year to date so far, which is triple credit card rates. So if you bought one Bitcoin, he bought one Bitcoin. He's got 60% more Bitcoin by the end of the year because he's implementing this strategy, if that makes sense. So imagine that you can buy one Bitcoin, or you can buy one Bitcoin's worth of MicroStrategy, and then you're going to have zero point 0.6 Bitcoin the next year, and then 60% more Bitcoin after the year after that, and 60% more Bitcoin after that, right? That's extremely valuable, right? You can't argue that that doesn't deserve a premium. And because he can do that, more people like us, or like myself, I should say, are willing to invest in this company because we want that cash flow, dividend cash flow of Bitcoin in the future, right? So I'm like, great, I want that 60% Bitcoin next year and the year after, and arguably, hopefully, until fiat currencies are no longer with us. So that makes a premium, and then he can use that premium to buy more Bitcoin. So it's kind of this chicken or the egg thing going on, where it's just like because he has a premium, he can buy more Bitcoin at a discounted rate to his stock. And because he can do that, people want to pile into his stock so they can get that yield that he's generating for his shareholders. Um, and so again, I don't even know where to start with that. That can't be understated. He's giving you a 60% return on an asset that's growing by 60% a year. Then you start to compare that type of company that's generating a 60% return on in an asset that's growing 60% a year on average over a 4-year moving average. What is that worth? And you compare it to every other company, and as a Bitcoiner, you're like, okay, cool. What's Google worth if it doesn't have any Bitcoin and is not generating any Bitcoin? How do you value that company? Right? Like arguably it should be worth zero. So yeah, I'll pause there because it's just I get bullish. I get really bullish just thinking about it. It's insane what's happening. It's fucking crazy.
Yeah, I mean, I keep thinking, if the company just owned the amount of Bitcoin that they own and did nothing else, that would be the most valuable company in the world. Uh,
Yeah.
but not only do they own it, they're collecting more faster than anybody else. And now you're starting to see all these other companies doing the same thing. Marathon just did a convertible bond the other day. You got Semler doing their thing. Metaplanet is the MicroStrategy of the Japanese stock market right now. It's the fastest growing company in the entire Japanese stock market. All they're doing is the same thing that MicroStrategy is doing. So not only are they creating more Bitcoin on top of their Bitcoin, but that Bitcoin is becoming far more scarce because everybody is going to copy what they're doing. Saylor had a great quote the other day that was like, NVIDIA is one of the best companies in the world. If you can do what NVIDIA does, you should go do it. It's a great business model, but you can't do what NVIDIA does. Apple's not doing it. Google's not doing it. Nobody else can do it. You can, however, do exactly what I'm doing. I'll give you the playbook. I'll tell you exactly how to do it. And I had that list up earlier, and I guess I'll throw it up again real quick. But this list of catalysts, one of them on that list is the Microsoft shareholder vote on the 10th of December. And I remember when they first announced this, I was like, "Oh, this is some Bitcoiner who figured out a way to get this uh, onto their shareholder proxy vote." And I looked into it and I figured out how you can do it. It's really not that difficult. You don't have to own that much to get this voice on there. I went through the whole process because I went through my brother's. I don't own any equities, but I went in and looked at my brother's equities, and I was like, "Hey, which one of these could we submit a shareholder proxy to?" And it turns out, you only have to own $2,000 worth of stock for 3 years, or 15,000 for 2 years, or 25,000 for 1 year, and you can submit a shareholder proposal, and then they'll either take it in and say, "Yeah, we're going to do that," or they'll say no, but then they have to put it on for a shareholder vote at the proxy. And so that was my assumption was this was some, Bitcoiner who'd figured this out and gone ahead and put it on there and made sure it was going to get voted on. And I was certain it was going to get voted down and it was just going to be one of these, things that we'd look back in 5 years and see, hey, we told you so. But now they've asked Saylor to come and speak at their shareholder meeting. So now Saylor is going to go and get apparently 3 minutes, which I've never heard Saylor talk for less than an hour and a half about Bitcoin without stopping. So I don't know how the hell he's going to do it for 3 minutes. Um, I mean, we're already at 45 minutes. We haven't really gotten to what we're talking about yet. So I don't know how anybody talks about, Bitcoin for 3 minutes. I'd be very surprised if that goes that short. And obviously it'll be broadcast, so we'll see that. But there's
Someone's gonna have to give Sailor a speedball or something.
yeah, they're going to have a Sailor translator of some kind.
Yeah.
But yeah, so we're gonna have that on the 10th of December, and something I thought would never be passed. If Microsoft passes that, I mean, that won't go into effect for a long time. It's going to take a lot of legal issues and other things to get out of the way. But if they vote on it and they decide that Microsoft is going to try to put that on their balance sheet, I mean, the floodgates are open. I think that I feel like things are happening this year that I wasn't expecting to have for another 4 years. This real conversation about Bitcoin strategic reserve, administration coming in that, say what you will about the Trump administration, but I didn't have the president's family selling multiple NFTs before inauguration day on my bingo card, and that's exactly what's happening. Whether you think that's good or not for Bitcoin, I don't know, but it's a thing regardless. And now MST, it's going to be MSTR and MSFT might both be having Bitcoin on their balance sheets and playing this game, and I think just like the individual, I think anybody who's really gone down the Bitcoin rabbit hole, at some point you get almost like addicted to buying Bitcoin or to acquiring Bitcoin. I certainly have gone through it. I'm still going through it. And clearly Michael Saylor is going through it, and he has figured out a way he's gotten super addicted to this. And on top of it, he's not leveraging his Bitcoin, he's leveraging his company. People ask, well, what happens when Bitcoin goes back to, what happens if this bull market ends and it goes to, 20K or 30K or whatever? He's going to have to sell it all to cover his bills and all that stuff. But we already witnessed an 80% drawdown last time, and they weathered it just fine. In fact, they ended up with more Bitcoin than they had, partly because they were owed some Bitcoin by either 3AC or FTX or one of these companies that fell apart. Um, because they hold the most important asset on the planet. They hold Bitcoin. So the rest of it is fiat games they're leveraging to be a part of that, and other people are going to see that. Other companies are going to see that. It's going to continue to be this hole in the dike of the fiat system. It's going to continue to be this vortex of black hole just sucking this fiat broken money into this hole. And we see that in the bond market. I mean, there's a reason it's the most oversold bond market or bond offering in the history of finance. Um, and Saylor's up $14 billion, I think, at this point on his Bitcoin holdings. And I think somebody tweeted today, if he sold it, it'd be the greatest trade ever. And what does he say? I'm never selling, right? Um, because that's how we all feel. That's how the individual feels, and as the individual feels, so too is the company, and eventually the nation state and the world. So,
I just wanted to throw out kind of a question, polling the sentiment of the people on the call here, because I was really intrigued. I've been intrigued by everything that Sailor's done for the last 4 years, at least. The only thing that I've purchased is Bitcoin. I don't buy any more equities. I still have an investment portfolio that I haven't like liquidated to change for Bitcoin. But maybe you said this at the top of the meeting when you mentioned like unleveraging as the year progresses. But do any of you so I feel like maybe I'm making some trade-off decisions to get into micro-strategies instead of buying more Bitcoin. And I wonder whether that's a short-term play in people's minds, because what Saylor and potentially Microsoft and others that are emulating Saylor with this convertible debt game are doing is increasing the intensity of this stock to flow value proposition with the scarcity and such. So are you guys thinking that you're playing in this capital market space and this fiat space because it's a brilliant moment in time and then defaulting back to accumulating Bitcoin? Or are you saying, I've got my stack and that stack is going to become ever more valuable, so now you're almost diversifying and getting a springboard off of it? What are people thinking about that if you're longish term Bitcoiners? And I don't know if 4 or 5 years is long term or not, but I've been committed for 4 or 5 years for sure.
Well, it's both actually. So it's kind of one of those things. It's like saying his strategy is to accumulate more Bitcoins. The goal is to get more Bitcoin, right? Like, but his company is acquiring Bitcoin. So his company is a Bitcoin machine. It produces 60% more Bitcoin for you every year, and you compound that. And you do a discounted cash flow analysis of the next 10 years, and you get a valuation of the company based on his ability to acquire 60% more Bitcoin every year. And then, of course, the price of his asset, Bitcoin, going up by around 60% a year. So they're both around 60%. So it's not, but then there's an additional, just like the Bitcoin cycles have a 4 year cycle, there's a bullish short-term period, right? Where you might want to double down on some kind of, take a loan out on your credit card or whatever that might be. You take a additional debt out to do a 6 month or whatnot type of thing, because you know that it's a 4 year cycle, or confident that it's a 4 year cycle. So you take 5% of your portfolio and you go, okay, cool. I'll take a HELOC out of my house. I'll take a loan out of my car, whatever that is. And then it's the same thing. And so this is the MicroStrategy 4 year bullish. And I shouldn't say 4 year, this is 1 year. And where a lot of money is going to be coming into MicroStrategy because of these NASDAQ. Like the key things here in this graph are that these passive inflows, like the NASDAQ 100, and here in purple, the S&P 500, these passive inflows of pension funds and whatnot are going to dump money into MicroStrategy once he gets included. And so right now, for the first time, he can be included in these indices at a high valuation, which means that they have to buy his stock at a premium. So we're front running them, right? We're getting in before billions and billions of dollars come in, and then we know that it's going to come in, and Michael Saylor knows that it's going to come in addition to all these other things that are positive catalysts for Bitcoin, the 4 year cycle, And then the additional thing, if people aren't familiar with it, they need to become familiar with where is it, the FASB accounting rule change. So what that is that if you're not familiar with that, it's his Bitcoin has only been able to be valued down, and when this change takes effect in beginning part of next year, he's going to be able to say that he's gotten profits on his Bitcoin. And that's going to change the valuation of his company, which is going to do two things. One is going to get everyone's attention. And additionally, with these indexes, he's going to be revalued at a higher number. So you're front running on those two points. So I think I answered that question, but it's to get more Bitcoin, and then there's a short term, medium term kind of confidence based on this information in the 4-year cycle.
Yeah,
It
it
just
makes sense to me.
depends on
Thanks,
your,
Blake.
it kind of depends on your like personal goals too. Like some people just want to go after Bitcoin, but they have retirement accounts, and MSTR would be your play with your retirement account. If you're not interested in learning options or like that's just like an extra like bonus. And it is still a company, like there's still risk there, like more so than buying straight Bitcoin, but there's also more upside, more reward. Um, where does Sailor have his Bitcoin? Is it on exchanges? Like I that's
Um,
like a downside.
Coinbase.
I don't
I've
actually know
heard Coinbase.
Yeah, I believe he has it with Coinbase.
all of it's in Coinbase.
I,
Does that
I
make
believe, yeah, I mean, unfortunately, I think some of these, um, the public companies have to
Yeah, they have to use qualified
custody it.
custodians.
Yeah, so they have to, they can't just, I don't believe they can self custody it. I believe that they have to use qualified. Now you've got other companies like, was it Fidelity built their own, but they're not, they're in a different type of a company where they could, was it Fidelity, I think, that built their own cold storage program? Um, but yeah, I think MicroStrategies has to have Coinbase custody.
So essentially, that would be what the rest of the companies are going to follow them do, like Microsoft and anyone else like buying, they're all buying from Coinbase. Mhm.
Not
Unfortunately,
sure. Yeah, go ahead.
unfortunately, Coinbase does custody a lot of the Bitcoin that's being sold and moved around and purchased. And, I mean, whether it's for them, Coinbase is involved. I think it's whatever Coinbase has an industry or a non consumer facing section. I can't remember what it's
Yeah,
Coinbase
like
Prime or something,
institutional
but
or yeah.
yeah, for their institutional, and that's where BlackRock and so I mean, Coinbase is a honeypot that is holding a massive amount, but that's just the nature of what's going to have to happen if this is going to become an institutionalized asset. Those companies are not going to be custodying their own Bitcoin, at least not right now.
And I think that brings up a good question is like, what are the risks to this, right? And what's the probability of those risks? And bring up a good question is like, that's a that's a definite risk. And you have to analyze, is that risk, put a percentage on that. Is that a 1% or 0.5% chance that the government comes in or Coinbase loses the account or gets taken over by the Russians or whatever happens to that custody model, and how secure is that? And you assessing that risk and convert or comparing it to the potential returns that you can get of, again, 60% Bitcoin returns year to date. So if he continues this, he's closer to get 80% returns in Bitcoin. So it's good to keep that in
Yeah.
mind and put that in comparison with the risk
Also,
and reward.
Coinbase gets a bad rap because I mean, I think
So
they deserve a bad rap because they should have done the Sailor thing, as soon as they went public. They should be doing this. They should have hundreds of thousands of Bitcoin on board. They gave that up, and they shitcoin and like I feel like every time I get an email from them, it's about a price raise and then some other, shitcoin that I should be looking at or whatever. It's a bummer. But that being said, they also have never lost any customer funds since 2013 when they opened. So they've been incredibly secure. There's a reason that Sailor and the rest of them trust their Bitcoin with them, or I mean, in a lot of cases, they have to trust their Bitcoin with them. Um, So I put it at a far less than 1% chance that they're going to become the honeypot that gets cleared out. But like you said, the safest thing you can do is have Bitcoin. And so, you asked a little bit before, what's your thesis, what's your plan? I don't think anybody should be in here necessarily talking about or be trading the MicroStrategy stuff um, until you get your own house in order. And for me, your own house in order means you have a nice Bitcoin stack that you're happy with. Like I started trading MicroStrategy options with like 1% of the value of my Bitcoin, maybe less. It's done well, so it's turned into quite a bit more. But for me, it was a yeah, I think this is interesting, and I want to see what it'll do. I caution people to not get caught up in the FOMO. And I say that because I just took a loan. I'll tell my story. So I've taken two on-chain loans this year. I took one last year, and then I took another one this year. And that's as leveraged as I've ever gotten. I've never taken a loan in my life for anything, but I took a loan against my Bitcoin this year because I felt confident about where the price was. And when when the money hit my account, I had a choice. To a do I send this to Charles Schwab or do I send this to Swan and buy more Bitcoin? And when push came to shove, even though I was very confident in MicroStrategy, that money all went into more Bitcoin and not into MicroStrategy stock. And I think in the end, I think I'm just addicted to Bitcoin. It's my first love. It'll be my great love of my life will be my Bitcoin, and I couldn't cheat on her with MicroStrategy calls. Um,
Your dog is so sad right now.
I know.
He thought he was your first love.
She couldn't hear me. She left the room.
Oh.
She missed out. Uh, but yeah, I mean, I really do like, it's the precious to me. It always will be. It's the thing we're all here for. It's the reason that Saylor is doing what he's doing. It's the reason that he's had the success he's had. Um, and so I think there's probably, depending on your risk, there's a lot of money to be made, extra money to be made if you do things correctly this cycle with MicroStrategy if you're willing to take that risk. I could have put hundreds of thousands of dollars into MicroStrategy last year instead of buying more Bitcoin, but I chose not to. And I think that's the right move. Certainly the right move for me. Um, I think that's the same. It should be the same. I think these are going to be the kind of advice that you used to get from Dave Ramsey. There's going to be a Bitcoiner giving this kind of advice for Bitcoiners in the future of like, it's a 7-step process or whatever, and step 6 is like buying calls on MicroStrategy, right? Like you got to get all these other things, learn about custody, get your Bitcoin, make sure you got a good stack, take care of your other debts, et cetera, and then you can start playing these games. But I do encourage Bitcoiners to get involved in these games because this is not going to be the last time that we have this kind of asymmetric knowledge because of Bitcoin. This is just the first of what I assume will be many, many trades over the next 30 to 40 years, in which we will have some sort of asymmetric knowledge because we know what Bitcoin is and we have the confidence of where Bitcoin is going to go. And so I encourage Bitcoiners to get in here. I think Bitcoin is kind of like a machete. Or a K bar if you're into such an analogy, and then there's the Swiss Army knife that you can start to learn all these other things that you can do to make a little bit more Bitcoin and tweak your stack and utilize your stack to get more Bitcoin and make your life easier and more comfortable. I think at some point you have enough, but clearly, that's not the case because Saylor has plenty and he's still going after it. He certainly, by any definition, he has enough and he's not stopping. So he's inspired me to take some risks that I don't think I would have taken otherwise. And I think that you're in a really good place right now to take a little risk. And I love the fact that for me, and I think for a lot of people, it's becoming true. Is like the non-risky thing is to have your entire net worth in Bitcoin. That's the non-risk. Then you can go from there. If we brought in any other person that's not already in this chat, somebody probably even people in your house and said to them like this was the non-risky thing, they would think you're crazy. My friend's been calling me crazy forever. I did feel like we were gonna have a dip though because my best friend who refuses to talk about Bitcoin actually asked me about Bitcoin the other day. It's that hot a topic, and so I was like, oh, we're in for a dip for a little bit. We gotta cool off. My buddy's got to be able to tell I told you so before we can go back up. So now you can tell I tell you so over Thanksgiving, and then we'll see what happens next. Anyway, I'm
Your
done.
buddies with Jim Cramer then?
Get pretty much, honestly, it's basically Jim Cramer. All right, who? Yeah, anybody have if anybody has any questions or anything, you want to,
I,
pick up a topic yourself or move on to something else,
I,
go for it.
I think I can wrap up on the bullish case for it. I just don't, I think going back to Dan's question, it's similar to Bitcoin where people are coming into it thinking about how they're going to get out of it. I mean, that's fair, obviously, right? But when you realize it's the only company in all the companies in the world that are generating Bitcoin cash flows, and they're doing it by selling different financial products to the financial system. In other words, there's so much demand for return in the markets that he's creating different products to sell to them. So he's not a he's not an enterprise software business anymore. He's making almost all his money by selling these assets to companies like Allianz, these debt products and whatnot. And he's using that to buy Bitcoin. So when you realize that he's the company that's acquiring Bitcoin at a very high rate, you want to own his company. And companies are forward looking. They think 10 years down the line, how much more Bitcoin is Michael Saylor going to be able to acquire? Which goes back to the valuation. He's going to be able to acquire a lot more Bitcoin leveraging these models, and it doesn't end. It's not a short-term play. It's something that's increasing at an exponential rate, and he's potentially going to be through his $42 billion in 16 weeks. And this isn't something that the well dries up on. This continues to go until until Bitcoin is done, until hyper Bitcoinization, if that makes sense. So he's going to be able to continue to do this for the foreseeable future. So it's not something that you'll trade out of. Yeah, there's a short-term kind of, let's compare it to the 4-year cycle of these positive catalysts coming in the next 12 months. But that doesn't necessarily mean that you have to get out of the position, just like a bull cycle in Bitcoin doesn't necessarily mean you have to get out of it. So I'd kind of say that.
Yeah, and I would add to that. I'm probably going to hold some MicroStrategy at the end of all this. I was talking about specifically about leverage for me. I Yeah, and options, and I have some of these unchained loans. I'm probably going to close the next few months. More, it's more comfortable to not be in those positions. I only want to be in those when I feel super confident about how much time we got left in a bull cycle. Um, you never know what the top of a bull cycle looks like. We have no idea. 99K could have been the top, and we're about to, go on another year and a half dip. Um, there's nobody knows that. Nobody can possibly say that. I'm very confident that's not the case, which is why I still have leverage on, and I'm not closing my loans anytime soon. But yeah, for me, that's the way that I plan on playing it. I will probably hold some MicroStrategy forever, just as an equity though, instead of trying to hold timing, leverage, and things like that. Um, let's see. I have one other thing I was going to say, and I just lost it out of my head. Yeah, I don't know. Yeah. Anyway, so that kind of covers everything I wanted to cover today. I know there's going to be more, and but I want to keep these kind of around an hour so that people aren't like, okay, I want to go visit those guys, but I don't have 2.5 hours to kill. Um, we'll continue to do these kind of as long as people are interested. And I want to see if anybody has any other questions before we kind of sign off, or if anybody has any other comments they want to make before we wrap this up. Okay. And yeah, just I hope you guys are enjoying this. We'll do them as long as it seems necessary. Every time that we want to kind of get together and have these chats. I just found out, Blake and I just found out. Well, Blake knew this, but I just found out that Ryan from Quant Bros, who's one of the bigger, the guys on Twitter who actually he just closed his account apparently, but he's a San Diego guy, so we're gonna try to track him down and maybe we'll get him on one of these calls one day.
That'd be cool.
Hey.
I'm emailing
Yeah,
with
that'd
but
be awesome.
he's a real flaky fuck, so we'll see. We'll see what happens. Not to throw him on the fire or anything yet, but I've never met the guy, but I've been emailing with him and it's been difficult to get in touch. So, but yeah, maybe we'll get him on one of these times. We'll see.
Well, thanks, John, for organizing this, man. Appreciate
Yeah,
it.
you got it. I got the recording. I'll put it up on YouTube again, like I did last time, as soon as I can get it loaded up. And other than that, yeah, look forward to seeing you guys again and chatting on Signal.
Great. Thanks again, John.
Thank you, John. Thank you,
Got it,
Blake.
man.
Guys.
Thanks, guys.
See you
See you
guys.
guys.
Have a great night.